March 7th, 2025. Broad River Correctional Institution, Columbia, South Carolina. A dimly lit chamber. A metal chair sits in the center of the room, bolted to the concrete floor. 3 uniformed men stand behind a partition, their rifles locked and loaded. A white paper target has been pinned over the condemned man's heart, a crude bullseye marking the spot where death will strike. Brad Sigmon, 67 years old, takes a slow breath. The weight of 24 years on death row sits heavy on his frail frame. He is shackled at the wrists and ankles, his body strapped to the chair with thick leather restraints. He doesn't res. A guard reads the official execution order. The words float through the room like a funeral hymn. The sentence will now be carried out. Sigmund's lips part slightly, his last words spoken in a strained voice. Only God should decide when a man dies. There is no response, no sympathy, no mercy. The warden signals the execution team. The 3 marksmen, positioned just 15 feet away, steady their aim. A red light flashes. The command is given. Fire. 3 gunshots ring out in perfect unison. A violent jolt. The chair rattles as Sigmund's body slams back against the restraints. Blood blossoms across his grey prison uniform, seeping through the white target. His mouth gapes open, a silent scream frozen in time. His fingers twitch, his breath staggers. Seconds stretch into eternity. At 6:08 p.m., the prison doctor steps forward. He presses 2 fingers against Sigmund's neck. No pulse. He lifts his hand and announces the time of death. Brad Sigmon is gone. The room is silent. The executioners lower their rifles. The chamber. Doors swing open, but no one moves. The weight of what has just happened lingers in the air. Outside, a small crowd of protesters stands in candlelight, holding signs that read, "The state just committed murder." But to the families of the victims, this is not murder, this is justice. Because 2 decades earlier, Brad Sigmon committed a crime so brutal, so senseless, that his fate was sealed long before he ever entered this chamber. A double homicide, a blood-stained baseball bat, a desperate woman running for her life. This is the story of Brad Sigmon, the man who chose the firing squad over the electric chair. And this is how he got here. If you're fascinated by cold cases, secret files, unsolved disappearances, and supernatural phenomena, you've just found your new favorite channel. Subscribe now, turn on notifications to never miss a new video, and share with others. Don't forget to hit the like button. It helps us create even better content every day. Before Brad Sigmon became the first man in 15 years to die by firing squad in the United States, he was just another ex-boyfriend who refused to let go. It all started in April 2001 in Taylors, South Carolina, a quiet suburban town where crime was practically unheard of. Sigmon, then 43, had been in a long-term relationship with Rebecca Barber, but their love had soured. By that spring, Rebecca had finally decided to end things. Sigmon didn't take it well. Friends and family would later describe him as obsessive and controlling. He couldn't accept that Rebecca was moving on, and when she refused to reconcile, something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to let her go, and if he couldn't have her, no one would. On the night of April 27th, 2001, Rebecca was staying at her parents' home. William David Lark, 62, and Gladys Lark, 59. When Brad Sigmon decided to make his move, he knew they wouldn't let him near her. He knew they saw him for what he truly was. So he waited until the early morning hours, when the house was silent, when no one would see him coming. And then he broke in. Sigmon entered the Lark home armed with a baseball bat. He could have brought a gun, a knife, anything quick. But a bat? That was personal. That was rage. The attack was swift, brutal, and unrelenting. He found David Lark first, asleep in his bedroom. Before the older man could even react, Sigmon brought the bat down on his skull with full force. The sickening crack of bone echoed through the house. 1 blow, 2, 3, 9 total. By the time he was done, David's skull was shattered. Blood pooled around the bed. But the noise woke Gladys Lark. She had barely made it out of her room before Sigmon turned on her. She screamed, but no one could hear. The first blow struck the side of her head, sending her collapsing against the door frame. She tried to crawl away, but he kept swinging. Like her husband, she suffered 9 blows to the head. By the time Sigmon was finished, both parents were dead. Rebecca was next. She had no idea what was happening, no warning, no time to react. Sigmon stormed into her bedroom, blood dripping from the bat. He grabbed her, dragging her out of the house before she could even process what had happened. Outside, a car was waiting. Sigmon shoved Rebecca into the passenger seat, gun in hand. He told her they were leaving South Carolina together, that she belonged to him, that she had no choice. She was terrified. Sigmon sped off, heading toward the North Carolina state line. Rebecca sat frozen, tears rolling down her face, the scent of blood still fresh on his clothes. But then, an opportunity. As they reached a secluded stretch of road, Rebecca made her move. She lunged for the door handle and threw herself from the moving car. She hit the pavement hard, rolling across the asphalt, scraping her skin raw. Sigmon slammed on the brakes. He stepped out, raised the gun, and fired. The bullet missed by inches. Rebecca sprinted into the woods, vanishing into the darkness before Sigmon could follow. He had lost her. With no other option, Sigmon floored the gas pedal and disappeared into the night. Rebecca made it to safety. Hours later, police arrived at the Lark home and found the grisly crime scene. 2 bodies, blood everywhere. A home that had once been filled with love, now a place of horror. Sigmon was now a fugitive, but not for long. Rebecca Barber had narrowly escaped death, but the nightmare wasn't over. Brad Sigmon was still out there, armed, desperate, and on the run. Authorities launched an immediate statewide manhunt. News of the brutal double homicide spread quickly, and within hours, Sigmon's name and face were plastered across television screens, newspapers, and radio broadcasts. But he had vanished. For 11 days, he evaded capture, slipping through the cracks of law enforcement's dragnet. Police combed through abandoned buildings, motels, truck stops, anywhere a fugitive might seek refuge. They interviewed friends, family, former co-workers, anyone who might know where he was hiding. Then, on May 8, 2001, a tip came in. Sigmon had been spotted in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, a popular tourist destination nestled in the Smoky Mountains. He was alone, disheveled, and acting suspiciously near a convenience store. Officers moved in. At 4:30 p.m., U.S. Marshals and local law enforcement surrounded the area. There was no dramatic standoff, no last-ditch effort to flee. When they approached, Sigmon simply raised his hands and surrendered. His reign of terror was over. By the time he was brought back to Greenville County, South Carolina, the case against him was airtight. The prosecution had everything: DNA evidence, eyewitness testimony, and a living victim who had survived to tell the tale. Sigmon's attorneys pushed for a plea deal, hoping to avoid the death penalty, but prosecutors refused. The sheer brutality of the murders left no room for leniency. In July 2002, after weeks of graphic testimony and forensic analysis, a jury found him guilty on all charges. 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of armed kidnapping, 1 count of possession of a weapon during a violent crime. The judge wasted no time in handing down the ultimate punishment. Brad Sigmon was sentenced to death. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read. No plea for mercy, no reaction at all. For Rebecca Barber and the remaining Lark family members, it was justice. But Sigmon's fight wasn't over yet. Death row in South Carolina isn't a quick path to execution. Sigmon spent over 2 decades behind bars, filing appeal after appeal, trying to escape his fate. His lawyers argued that his mental health issues should spare him from execution. They challenged the state's methods of capital punishment, claiming they were cruel and inhumane, but court after court denied his requests. His final appeal reached the US Supreme Court in 2021, but it was rejected. The sentence would stand. Sigmon's only choice now was how he would die. In South Carolina, death row inmates could choose between lethal injection or the electric chair. But in 2024, the state revived the firing squad as an option. Sigmon chose the bullets. He said he believed it was the most humane way to die. And on March 7, 2025, after 24 years waiting for death, his time finally came. Brad Sigmon had spent almost a quarter of a century on death row, but now the waiting was over. His final days were eerily quiet. No more appeals, no more delays. The South Carolina Department of Corrections confirmed that March 7, 2025 would be his execution date, and this time, nothing would stop it. Sigmon was transferred to a special holding cell near the death chamber at Broad River Correctional Institution in Columbia. He spent his last 24 hours under constant supervision, with guards rotating shifts to ensure he didn't attempt suicide before the state could carry out its sentence. As the sun set over the prison, Sigmon was given his last meal, a standard prison tray. He made no special requests, no steak, no lobster, no elaborate final indulgence, just another meal, like any other day. He declined a visit from a spiritual advisor. He had no family members present. Unlike some inmates who fill their final hours with prayers or goodbyes, Sigmon was alone. His only words to the guards: "Let's get this over with." At 5:45 p.m., he was escorted to the execution chamber, shackled, silent, resigned. Inside the chamber, a metal chair sat bolted to the concrete floor. Thick leather straps waited to bind him in place. A paper target was taped over his heart, a crude marker for the shooters. Sigmon didn't resist as the guards strapped him in. His breathing remained steady. He was given a final chance to speak. His voice was calm but strained. Only God should decide when a man dies. A red light flashed. From behind a wall, 3 anonymous marksmen raised their rifles. They aimed through a rectangular opening, their barrels protruding into the chamber. They did not see his face, only the white target over his chest. The warden gave the command: "Fire." 3 simultaneous gunshots shattered the silence. Sigmon's body jolted violently, the impact slamming him back against the chair. Blood soaked through his uniform, darkening the paper target pinned to his chest. His mouth opened, but no sound escaped. His fingers twitched, his breathing slowed. Then, nothing. At 6:08 p.m., the prison doctor stepped forward. He pressed 2 fingers to Sigmon's neck, searching for a pulse. There was none. Brad Sigmon was dead. Outside the prison, a small crowd of protesters gathered in candlelight. Some held signs that read, "State-sanctioned murder," while others simply bowed their heads in silent opposition to the death penalty. But for the families of David and Gladys Lark, this was not murder. It was justice. Rebecca Barber, the woman Sigmon had once tried to kill, released a short statement through her attorney. "I've spent 24 years living in fear of a man who took everything from me. Tonight, that fear is gone, but no execution can bring back my parents. No sentence can undo the past." Despite the public controversy, South Carolina officials defended the execution. The law was followed, the sentence was carried out, justice was served. But questions remained. Was the firing squad truly humane? Was there a better way to punish the worst of criminals? Did Brad Sigmon deserve a second chance? Or was this always his fate? No matter where the truth lies, one fact remains. On March 7, 2025, Brad Sigmon met the same fate he had once inflicted on others, and the world kept turning. Brad Sigmon's story ended the moment the bullets tore through his chest. But, as with every execution, the repercussions didn't die with him. News of Sigmon's execution spread within minutes. Major media outlets covered the details of the first firing squad execution in the US in 15 years. Newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post emphasized the controversy surrounding the method, reigniting the national debate over the death penalty. But while legal experts, human rights advocates, and politicians clashed over the issue, one question loomed over everything. Was Brad Sigmon's execution truly justice, or was it revenge? The response to Sigmon's death was sharply divided. Death penalty advocates argued that he got exactly what he deserved. They pointed out that his victims had no say in how they died, and that he knew what he was doing when he brutally murdered his ex-girlfriend's parents. Opponents of capital punishment called the execution inhumane, archaic, and beneath a modern society. To them, the idea of a state tying a man to a chair and shooting him was a grim throwback to a darker time in history. Some of the victims' family members spoke out. To them, there was no joy in seeing another person die, but there was also no doubt that Sigmon had to pay for what he did. Rebecca Barbaro, the woman who survived his attack and lived with its trauma for 24 years, issued a short statement. "This is not a happy ending. There are no happy endings in this story." Sigmon's choice to die by firing squad sparked discussions about which method of execution is truly the most humane. South Carolina reinstated the firing squad in 2024 after issues with lethal injection drug supplies caused a crisis on death row. Experts weighed in. The firing squad is quick, with death typically occurring in seconds. Unlike lethal injection, which can fail and prolong suffering, firing squad executions have a much lower failure rate. In states like Utah, where the method has been used before, autopsies show that inmates lost consciousness almost immediately, but critics had a different view. Strapping a man to a chair and shooting him in the chest feels more like a battlefield execution than a legal punishment. As debates intensified, some groups pushed to ban the method, while others argued to expand its use in states struggling with lethal injection alternatives. Sigmon may not have seen himself as a symbol, but in death, he became part of a much bigger fight. People wanted to know more about him. What led an ordinary man to become a murderer? But while journalists and researchers dug into the details, one thing remained unchanged. The Lark family was still gone. David and Gladys had died in the most brutal way imaginable. Their final moments were filled with terror, pain, and helplessness, and no execution could ever undo that. And Brad Sigmon, he spent more years waiting to die than he ever spent as a free man. His life ended with 3 bullets to the chest, strapped to a chair. What do you think? Was justice truly served, or was this just another act of state-sanctioned vengeance? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the world's most chilling true crime cases. We'll see you in the next video. Stay curious. Stay cautious.